Hello, everyone. Very good articles y'all wrote. I sent you some feedback, and I just sent them as a PDF format. Very good, and just thank y'all for letting me read your articles. Y'all did a really good job. One thing as I read your articles, I saw a recurring theme was getting teachers involved, stakeholders involved, and teacher development, and how you can do that. So then I was like, all right, this is going to be a really good week because I'm going to roll you into grant writing because grant writing is part of curriculum coordinators and curriculum specialist programs, especially in the central office. But one of the big elements of this is you're going to have to devise and be able to function as a curriculum coordinator when you're doing grants. So let's be more specific. Uh, Whenever I graduated from Ole Miss, as well as Mississippi State University, when I graduated from these universities and I went to other colleges and I started my job, started my career, there was always this element called grant writing that I really didn't know about and what that was. I knew that there was grants out there and people would get money and people would get funded for grants. And I just didn't understand how to do that. I always thought that was kind of out of my area. Well, I really didn't have anyone at those universities who taught me how to write grants, and that could have been my fault. I probably didn't, knock on people's doors and say, "Hey, you're good at grant writing." I had heard that there were professors who were good at grant writing, but what I found out is there's a lot of grants out there, and with there being a lot of grants out there, a lot of people learn how to write grants and they get good at it, and that brings money into your university or your high school or your central office. You are getting an advanced degree and you may be asked to write a grant. You may be asked if you want to be, you know, you want to try this. And if you get really good at grant writing and playing this game, then you actually become very marketable. There is some grant writers that I know in the public school realm who got their master's degree and they focused on grant writing and they did a really good job with it. And they write grants and they write grants very well. They are so good at it that they have a central office and they sit back and they write grants and they run their grants and no one really bothers them because the school knows that this person is bringing in federal money into our school district. And I knew one that was so good at it that they actually another high school bought her out. They paid her an extreme amount of money, and they brought her over to their school district, and that was a big coup for that area. But she also had tied some of the grants not to the school district but to herself. So when she left that other school district, she took some of the money with her, and that was legal, but that was very devastating for that school. So grant writing is very important, and I'm going to just show you and how you as a curriculum coordinator, a curriculum expert, can use your skills, and you're going to have to function in on these grants. And we're going to show you how to do that. This is going to be a fun little project, and it's a fun project because I actually have a grant right here. Many times they'll tell you if you're taking a college class, they'll say, grant writing is this and grant writing is that, and everyone go to Google and type in education grants, and it's going to take you to grant.gov, which is a federal database of all these grants. But there's some key words you need to learn, and the number one key term is RFP. RFP, request for proposals. That's what an RFP is. We get these RFPs, and your school district will get RFPs, and they are just requests for proposals. It means someone has gotten a huge amount of money, or they've gotten a set amount of money, and they're now requesting for proposals, an RFP, for anyone to send in a proposal and to say, I would like some of your money and I will spend it this way. And that's what RFP is. And this, what I've sent you on this email, is an RFP. This is an RFP for a grant that's ended, but it was an RFP that was sent out last year, and it had an end date of we'll see right here. So it says right here, Mississippi Institute of Higher Learning. So this is IHL. So this is an IHL RFP. So that's a lot of acronyms. Request for proposals for the establishment of summer institutes for teachers. So they're requesting you to send in a proposal for summer workshops to train teachers. That's pretty easy. So the first page they have here is the program. It talks about, it gives you a definition of what's going on. The purpose of it is to teach core academic subject areas, and it's going to give you the purpose statement. Eligibility is limited to partnerships comprised of a minimum of one private or state institute of higher education and the Division of Education that prepares teachers and principals. So this was designed for colleges in Mississippi, like Mississippi State University, Ole Miss, all the major colleges, to partner up with a local school district and train their teachers in a workshop. That's all it was. So if you worked for a university, if you were a graduate student at a university like you are now, if you were, Mindy, if you said, hey, I want to, or Mr. Bogan, you said, hey, I want to write this grant and I want to train teachers, you could have done this. So this was actually out there for you. So funding, it says this will be the final year for this grant. So they've done this for many times, but this grant comes out every year. And look at this right here. Look at this submission. Now this deadline's passed, but this is something I want to stress to you. Proposals must be received at the Mississippi Board of Trustees of State Institution of Higher Learning by 12 noon on Friday. When they set that deadline, if you miss that deadline, if you turn it in at 12:01, they throw it in the garbage. Those deadlines are hard, firm deadlines. You cannot miss that deadline. If you turned in at 11, and I have turned in a grant at 11:51, and it was due at 12, and it was accepted, but those grants have to be turned in. They will not accept it after 12 noon. So you get these deadlines. Now this grant, it doesn't say when it was released. It was about a month. We had about a month to really work on this. So you have a brainstorming session. So that's your first 2 pages. Funding, it says right here. I think it says somewhere in the document, but they told us, and we already knew, the funding was going to be $90,000. So $90,000 was what they were going to give to every institute, and they had around 10 of these to award, so it was a $900,000 grant. So they capped it around $90,000. Well, they didn't, not around, they capped it at 90. So if you could write a proposal, and if you wrote a proposal for $95,000, they weren't going to accept it. So they told everybody, said we were going to send out 10 awards at $90,000 each. So that's, you get that whenever you talk to the grant person. You'll see right here, it's got the next page is the background, the improvement program administration. It talks about that, the anticipation average funding, and here's where your number is, 80 to 100,000. So we all called these grant people, Mississippi IHL, and they told us they said 90,000. So 90 to 100,000 was their number, but it was really just, they said, you know, you definitely want to write it for 90. All right, so eligibility is limited to partnerships, talks about that. Now, one thing they did was they said you had to partner up with a local school district that was an LEA, and that is, and it defines what an LEA is, which is you have to look at numbers of title school districts, free and reduced lunches, and items such as that. So they were looking at those underperforming school districts. Meridian would be fine, but you can actually partner with any of them, any school districts. Kemper would be good, school districts like that. So Quitman would be okay. So mainly if you're in Mississippi, most of the areas are LEAs. Program component priorities. Look at this as you scroll down, guidelines, and then project duration. So it's a 20-day workshop. It says right here a minimum of 20 days equals 8 hours, including a lunch. Project size, you determine how many people you want to have. There's a $4,000 payment to an external evaluator. It says right here. You pay all of your participants right here under compensation $100 per day. So do the math on that one. If you have 10 participants, 10 teachers for 20 days, so they're getting $100 a day. So each teacher is going to receive $2,000. All All right, so, okay, I kind of got that. And then they also want 2 follow-up days. The grant talks about that as well. They want a follow-up fall and a follow-up spring, so it's really 22 days. So you got to get all the fine print on there. It's 22 days, so that's $2,200. All right, so if I've got 10 participants and they're each receiving $2,200, then that's $22,000 that I'm going to have to budget for my participants. Okay, well, that's $22,000 for 10 people. All right, so I can have 20 people for $44,000. Or I could have 30 people and make $66,000. All right, so you start seeing your budget can go up. So it depends on how many participants you want. So you want to maximize your participants so you can also maximize your budget. But what's going to happen in that workshop? Okay, so you're going to have a 20-day workshop. Who's going to be teaching those 20-day workshops? And then you have to ask yourself, how are they going to be compensated? How are the people teaching the workshop going to be compensated? All right, so I've got a 20-day workshop, and I'm going to bring in a professor to do 1 day. How much are you going to pay that person? So you got to put that in your budget as well. So you see that there's some competing factors. You have a $4,000 external evaluator. You have stipends, $2,200 per person. How many participants can you get? And also you got to pay everyone a salary to teach that. So you see that there's always that. Now also this is going to need some supplies. You're going to have markers, and people, 8-hour days are going to be very long. How much are you going to budget for supplies? You don't have to say, I'm going to buy markers, I'm going to buy this, but you need to have a budget for supplies, which could be, $2,000 for supplies. All right, so about postage. So you got to think about all that whenever you're doing this. And that's why I really want, just read this and you'll really like it. As it scrolls down, it talks about the format. You don't have to really get into this because you're not going to be doing this part, but it talks about how this is going to be rated, a 115-point rating system. You got the abstract, the project narrative. So what does this mean? When you turn in your proposal to IHL by that noon deadline, which was last November, they then send it out to evaluators who will score your proposal. And it takes about a month. It takes about a month to 6 weeks to get yours scored. And then you'll get it. And then they say, okay, we've got 50 applicants who want money, 50 proposals. We're only going to fund 10. So the top 10 scores get funding. And then they send you. So that's how that works. So grants are amazing because they bring in a large amount of money, depending on the grant you write. But you promise all of this stuff that you're going to do. I'm going to do this here, and we're going to have a 20-day workshop, and we're going to recruit people, and we're going to spend this much money on supplies, and this is what I promise. And you give it to them in a proposal, and then you walk away. And then you receive a letter that says, hey, you've been funded. Thank you. Here's your money. And all the stuff you promised, you got to go do. So you can see that as you are a master's degree, an ed specialist degree, you're getting your higher level degrees, and you start getting these central office jobs, they may ask you to be a grant writer because you have that background. You've taken the classes, you've taken this class. But they may ask you to write a grant. You may end up writing a grant every 2 or 3 weeks, and then you're going to have so many grant proposals. And then you've got to organize all that. So it's going to be a lot, especially special education grants. All of these grants come in all the time, and that's something that you're going to have to be on top of. But with that said, you can buy really nice stuff with grants if it's in your budget, and you can be in charge of these grants, and you can get travel money and go places, and grant money definitely does help things, and it makes things, you have more flexibility. As you scroll down, you'll see all this. So this whole week is going to be just grants. So that's the great thing. So I'm going to give you a quick little assignment sheet. Hopefully this video will help you. But look. Examine the guidelines that begin on page 6. Let me change that to begin. My apologies. I'll reword that. Brainstorm and think about a professional development 20-day you could propose for you to help your school district. Professional development workshop. And remember, the grant also coordinates 2 follow-up visits. I'm just going to help you out with that one. I just want you to propose 20 days for the summer. Simple as that. So on this project, what you do is you create a title for your project and just a couple of paragraphs where you've read this RFP and you go, okay, I'll give you an example. I'm gonna partner up with Meridian Public School District, and I'm gonna do a 20-day workshop with just the science teachers. So that's 4 science teachers per all the school districts they have. So it'll be 20, 25 science teachers, and I'm going to do a 20-day workshop dealing with science and literacy and how we can do a cross-curriculum connection between science and literacy, and that's going to help that out. I'm going to, do all this with Meridian Public School District. I'm going to partner up with them, and I'm going to see how this works. So you could do that. So that would be your narrative. You could do a 20-day workshop with social studies teachers. You could do a 20-day workshop with all the teachers. Now, I'll give you some insight on mine. I did a 20-day workshop with everybody in 5 through 12. So I did not deal with elementary. We dealt with 5 through 12. So that's one thing we did. So look at how you'd want to do something like that. Project number 2, you can turn all these at the end of the week. Now that you have your title, imagine it is now time to create your budget. Now, this is the fun part. The grant will fund up to $90,000, and you really want to maximize your workshop. Create a budget based on the criteria of the proposal that will pay stipends. Now remember, if you read this proposal, it's $2,200. It's going to be 22 days. It's 20-day workshop in the summer, and it's 2 follow-up. Now let me give you an idea what I mean by follow-up. The 20-day workshop is where you train them, and then 1 day in the fall and 1 day in the spring, they come back for 8 hours and they present in their proposals. They do presentations for like 25 minutes a piece, talking about what they've learned in that 20-day workshop and how it helped their school. So that's it. So the follow-ups, but they still get $100 for that. So you need to create a budget for that. Now, before you start saying, well, this will be easy, I got a $4,000 external evaluator who's going to come in and evaluate me to make sure I'm spending the money right. So the rest of it I can just spend, $86,000 on stipends. Now, who's going to teach your workshop? Is it just going to be you? Are you going to receive any money for that? How much money is enough money? How are you going to factor that in? So that's something you need to factor in. Supplies, all those items of that. Postage, phones, copies is a big factor as well. So look at your budget and how you want to do that. You don't want to have one teacher you're doing the workshop for, where you give them $2,200 and then you spend $87,000 on supplies and your salary. That's not going to. That's a proposal that's not going to be successful. So you want to show you want to maximize the benefit and the impact on the teachers in your school district. We're giving them a 20-day workshop. But you also want to make sure that you're paying and compensating your instructors properly and giving them the proper supplies. Think about that. Very simple. Project 3, outline the 20 days of the workshop that you propose. List each of the 20 days. Now this is where you're going to have to get into it really big. You're going to have to create your 20 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for 4 weeks. And you're going to need to give a topic for the day, and then break down the hourly subtopics. So you're going to have to curriculum develop that. So if you're going to do a technology for science teachers or technology for math teacher workshop for 20 days, I'm going to need 20 days broken down. Not minute by minute. You can take some of the hours and break them into 2 hours. That's fine. But we're just looking at what your agenda is going to be for all 20 days. To me, that is the hardest, because for me that was the hardest, because I was like, and here's the reason it was the hardest. When you do that, you're committing to teaching that. Now it will not be difficult for you, because this is a fictitious. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this grant. There's no money coming to you if you get it. So you're not submitting this to anyone. You're only submitting it to me. But to me, whenever I wrote down day 1, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, team building exercise, I knew that we were going to have to do that. So you're committing to, you're watching your whole day being booked. And then, so that was just kind of, so you're like, man, I better make a good day out of it. It needs to be good. We're going to spend an hour on PowerPoint. We're going to spend an hour on Web 2.0 tools. So you really, that was always the most daunting task for me because I had to make really good agendas because, oh man, there's nothing worse than doing a 5-day workshop and realizing you don't have enough material or you're off topic or this topic's just bad. Why did I pick this topic? All right, Project 4 is really easy. Project 4 is you have now been fully funded. So you've received the letter. Congratulations, you're funded. Now you got to go recruit the teachers. So based on your budget, if you've got 22 or 25, if you chose science or math or whatever subject you chose, you create a flyer that is catchy. You can use Microsoft Word, you can use Microsoft Publish, any of those elements like that. Create a flyer that you would put in a teacher's lounge that's going to show teachers what they're looking at. Hey, this is a workshop, sign up by here, contact information for you, but a quick flyer that's going to show them how to sign up for this workshop. You may want to stress the money. I've done a grant like this for about 3 years now, and I found that the money was a big issue. So I put on there $2,200. Earn $2,200, simple as that. But I also put the dates on the flyer, and I put all June, and little things like that. I'll just give you some extra things about this grant. And what I've learned writing grants is if you're going to do a summer workshop, teachers for the most part want it as fast as possible. We had a summer workshop that we stretched over June and July. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. They said they wanted 20 days as fast as possible. So we run it from June 1 to June 20 or June 24th, June 25th, but you got to factor in weekends on that one. So we didn't do them on the weekends. We just went 4 days straight in June. Teachers want them as fast as possible. They don't like them spread out. So I also found out that with recruiting, I learned that don't give it to the principals and ask them to name teachers. That didn't work. Some of the principals were overwhelmed. Some of the principals they would pick 5 or 6 teachers and just put their name on a sheet. And then I would call the teachers and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I found just to go give it to the teachers and say, hey, who wants to sign up? And that was something real simple. So this is a fun week because it's all about grants. And grant means money. And money, and also we're looking at grant and curriculum coordinating. And so that's also a big element of that. And then next week we'll wrap up everything. I'll give you big old projects to do, and we'll have fun with that one. Not big projects, but we'll have another week. We're going to look at some curriculum elements, look at some reform movements, look at some major key points like that, and then really get you geared up for comps. That's going to be the big thing, is comprehensive exams. I'm going to give you as close as possible the comprehensive exam format question that would give, and then help you, and you're going to write that. You're going to write your answer for that. That's going to help you out with comps. Real simple as that. So this is a fun little 2 or 4 week class that we're doing. But this is about grant writing, and this is something that no professor taught me because it's my fault. I should have been knocking on their doors. But grant writing is always very impressive. You can turn these in Saturday night. That's fine. If you want to, you can turn them on all at once. But these are 4 real quick projects. But please spend a couple of days, just in your spare time, read this proposal. Read this RFP. Really get into here, and because this is one of the easier ones. This is a very clean RFP. I've read some that I was like confused by and I was lost. But see if you can really embrace this RFP and see what's going on with this, and see how that works. Just remember that this is an old RFP. Yeah, it was due in November, and but I just wanted to share it with you and let you. We can use just to practice on, and real simple as that. So if you have any questions, just shoot me an email or just give me a call. I hope everything's going well. Thank you for some great answers. And last week, those were some really good papers, and I read them. I read them today. I printed them out, and I spent several hours reading them, and while I was watching the Tour de France. And but hopefully this proposal will help you out. And I hope everything's going well. If you have any questions, just give me a call. Thanks so much.